Well, let's do this. It's
we can move.
a couple minutes after 5.
That's all right.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. It is August the 19th. Before we get into an approval of the minutes or anything like that, Bob and I had conversation late this afternoon. For the committee's knowledge, before we begin, we have 6. We have had wonderful attendance, but it is the dog days of summer, and we have 6 of our committee members who are not with us this evening for various reasons. We have a quorum, so we're parliamentary, we are approved to proceed. But Bob and I thought that we would at least put it on, and we also have our steady alternate, John Rankin. Thank you, John. But Bob and I thought that we owed it to the committee to at least have a discussion on whether we wanted to proceed tonight. We can,
We're going to adjourn to Evo.
well, we can adjourn to Evo, we can, you know,
It depends on what we're doing. It depends on what's next.
I hear you.
Okay.
we,
Or Market Street. either.
or let's give some commercials. We got Mogan's, we got Evo, we got Market Street.
Right, everybody.
So I'm open to thoughts. And again, Bob and I thought it would just be best to at least have the conversation. We have 6 members of the committee not here tonight. So I'll leave it at that. Are there any thoughts among the group? Yes, sir, Phil.
Could we proceed, and Laura will send out, of course, verbatim of what we do.
Sure.
And if any one of the 6 feels strongly that their opinion wasn't heard, they can move to reconsider that item that they're concerned about.
At the next meeting, if you will.
Yeah.
Okay? Well, obviously, we'll have everything recorded. So Phil, you're a thumb up to let's go.
That's the one vote.
Understood. Thank you. Does anybody else have any thoughts? There's no right or wrong answer here, everybody. We're just, you agree with Phil?
You know, and I won't be here next meeting
Okay.
either.
And it's not that I don't agree with Phil, but we could also use this as a time of good discussion and just not have any formal votes on anything and just talk about, you know, history and any concerns that we have with this section. And then wait to vote on any such matters till the next meeting.
So I'm inclined, and I like that thought, I'm inclined that if we're going to meet, we're going to meet. And we will act again in accordance with proper parliamentary procedure. We would record votes. So I'm of the view, and I hear you, Catherine, but if we're going to meet, we're going to meet and we're going to vote. And as Phil has put it, as we all know, our minutes are exhaustive and extensive. I will send out, with the committee's permission, from Bob and myself, the conversation about this conversation. We'll do that in email form for the public also, and put forth what Phil has sort of put forth. And a reminder of something David said prior to the meeting beginning. Remember, we're revisiting everything anyway, right? That's sort of our standard procedure. So to your point, Phil, Wayne might not like what we had to do on Section 804, but he'll have the opportunity to weigh in at some point. So are we?
We're getting to 8:04 tonight?
We're on the back end of things. We might move fairly quickly this evening. So if we're all okay with that, I will officially then call the meeting to order. And with that, I will call for an approval of tonight's agenda.
So moved.
Thank you, Tony. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Sonia. Any discussion on the agenda? Yes, sir, Bob.
The only thing would be that my understanding is that that section 706, which is the tax cap provision, would be one of the things that would come up tonight. My understanding is that Wayne Strasburg, who is not here, was supposed to be providing a report with regard to that.
That's correct.
And based on the conversation I had with you, I thought your inclination was to not, in lieu of the fact that Wayne was not here, that we would not deal with that one section tonight. and wait for Wayne to be present to be able to provide that information.
And for the group's purposes, I'm trying to get to the section
706.
706. So,
Page 40.
thank you. Would you like to make an amendment to the agenda?
If that's in fact what the thought is, then I would suggest that we amend the agenda to exclude section 706 from whatever discussions we have.
Second.
Thank you, Bob. And the second I heard from Phil first, I believe. So let's vote. Any discussion on that amendment or proposed? All right, let's vote on the amended agenda. No, let's vote on the motion first. Thank you, Phil. All those in favor of the motion to remove section 706, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Thank you. Now, I will accept a motion to approve the amended agenda for this evening.
So moved.
Thank you, Tony. Is there a second?
Second.
Is that Sonia? Was that you? Thank you. Any discussion on the amended agenda? All right, hearing none, we'll call for a vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The joy of having such a veteran of parliamentary procedure as Phil is...
Remember when I presided, Vic Laws sat on my left.
So you had, there's Bob Benson, Vic Law's partner, sitting to my left. So you were in good hands and I'm in good hands. Thank you, Phil.
Yeah.
Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from our July the 15th meeting?
So moved.
Thank you, Tony. Is there a second? Phil, thank you. Any discussion, changes? Hearing none. All those in favor of our minutes from July 15th, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That's unanimous. For the group's purposes, I just want to let everybody know on a personal note, I've been down and out with bronchitis. I'm on the mend. As you hear me cough, I'll do the best I can to do it over here. Also want to take the opportunity publicly to thank Laura and Bob, both of whom we were in communication this week on whether I would be able to be here tonight or not. And I want to thank Bob for his willingness to step forward and his preparation for tonight. Thank you, Bob. And Laura, thanks for also entertaining that conversation. So if I get out of control on the coughing front, I will turn the meeting over to Bob, but I'll do the best I can. I'm not any longer contagious, but the bronchitis is just going to keep lingering for a little while. So where we are tonight, first is Mr. Wilbur had prepared for us a revised section 601A. Paul, I might ask you if you wouldn't mind reading that into the record for us?
Sure.
Thank you.
Let me also, I had a
Yes, sir.
co-conspirator, and that was
Yes.
Laura,
Yes, thank you.
in producing this. So here's what we came up with. Section 601, Personnel System. Upon recommendation of the county executive, the county council shall establish a personnel system which shall have the force of law by resolution after a public hearing. Upon recommendation of the county executive, the county council may modify or revise the personnel system by resolution after a public hearing.
Thank you, Paul. That wording came as a result of the motion that we had put into play, and we just sort of asked for a little clarification. Somebody help me here. I think we now should accept a motion to accept this proposed new language for 601, Section A.
So moved.
Thank you, Tony.
Second.
Thank you, Matt. Any discussion on 601A? All right, hearing none, we'll call for, yes, sir, Bob. Yes, sir.
I thought part of the problem was that in the prior, under the prior county executive, that he never presented a recommendation or a proposal. And the way this is written doesn't say the county executive shall, it says upon recommendation. So does that require the county executive to make a recommendation?
Well, I think as
Question.
the personnel system goes, right now, there's a complete rewrite of the personnel manual underway. But as often happens, and last county council meeting, there was a discussion of a particular amendment to the personnel manual to deal with a situation. So, the comprehensive rewrite is unusual. The piecemeal is more the usual route. And I think the county executive would, he is the one that oversees most of the employees of the county, and if human resources brings an issue to him which needs to be addressed, then I think he's the one that would present it to the council.
Is that how it happened this past week? Was it
Yes.
presented by the county executive?
I believe it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Bob,
I don't have any issues
Yeah,
with that.
understood.
I was under the impression that under the prior county executive, that no recommendations came forward, and consequently, nothing occurred.
Yeah,
And
I think-
that's what required or precipitated the change in the charter to say the county council would do it. So the question I'm asking is, does the language that's been presented, is that viewed as making mandatory that the county executive will, from time to time, make recommendations? Or do we even need to do that?
I think the way I would look at it is the county executive should be the one who is aware of a need to make a change, so he would bring it forward. That would be what you would expect in the normal course of business, even though that may not have happened in the prior 4 years.
Should the council have the ability to make a presentation? Now, I guess the executive would have the right to veto, but should the council have the ability to say, we think this issue needs to be addressed, and this would be assuming that there would be some interaction between the two entities, but the council is not satisfied because the executive never presents. So then the council says, well, we're presenting this proposed change.
Okay, that's not the way this is written, that it would be an initiation at the council.
I realize that when I'm looking at the current reading, it, and the implication, if I'm reading it correctly, is that the council may modify or revise. So should it?
so,
Can I just
Laura?
jump in here? We were under the impression from the last Charter Review Committee meeting that you guys wanted to go back to the old language.
correct, we're reversing, in effect, an action by the county council.
Right, so we
We're-
tried to come up with something
Yes.
where it would balance both branches of government, the
Yes.
executive and the legislative. So it's upon the recommendation of the executive, but council would still have to approve.
Right. And that's, again, sort of what happened last week, in fact, right, at the county.
I believe so, right?
This
Pam
was-
brought that
Yes, so the
recommendation.
executive did not attend that work session.
Right.
But we did have our Director of Finance and our Human Resource Director present it.
We work for the
Yeah.
executive.
So at least it came before council this time,
Okay.
whereas in the prior administration, it was just done. It was never even discussed with council.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sonia?
So when I go to, so many papers, the trees are screaming. The section, I guess that, from some of the feedback that came back from the council, I just have, the questions that were asked, you mentioned, I'm not gonna read all this to you, but it says, over the last few years, there have been several changes to the benefits program, particularly 457B plan, which were not approved by council. Was this an oversight, or should clarification be added to the section, which is what we talked about? I'm asking, so my questions are, or what I want to know is, does this clarify the section? Was it clear? I know we went back to the original language. Is it clarified down for that particular question? There's also another question that came under here. Should this section clarify that all new positions are to be approved? Now, this is 601B, so this might be a different section. This is 601B. But anyway, should this section clarify that all new positions are to be approved by council by separate legislation? I'm not asking it to be in here. I'm just saying, are those questions being answered, or do we feel like it is clarifying anything from going back to the original language or the language that you and that both of y'all put together?
My thoughts on that is that I'm not certain it clarifies the benefits part of it, but as far as any changes to the pay and classification plan, it does. Keep in mind, though, that the language that is being proposed is that the changes can now be made by resolution, which is different than a legislative bill. With the legislative bill, you're required to have the public hearing, the county executive has the opportunity to veto it, and there's a certain time period in which you have to wait before it goes into effect. We have quite a few department heads that complain about that process just because the amount of time it takes. Adopting a resolution is much quicker than a legislative bill. So what Paul and I try to come up with is an efficient process that still provides transparency for the public, but makes it better for the department heads to get the approval that they need.
Laura, so you talk about resolution, but in this, it says by resolution after a public hearing. So I'm a little confused. I apologize.
So you would have the public hearing first?
Yes.
And then
Then you
on
would-
the resolution?
Understood.
And then you could vote on that resolution right
Okay.
after the public hearing,
Same meeting.
same meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I sort of remind the group, and I know we haven't gathered in a while, and I know it's the dog days of summer, that we are going to be making recommendations to the county council, which they may or may not decide to send forward. The chances that they're going to send this forward are probably pretty slim, since we are reversing something that they have put into place. So I think when and if we put this forward as one of our changes, we'll say why, and we'll say it as firmly as we can, but that doesn't mean that it moves forward. So I don't want us to get too bogged down in creating the perfect, because the practical reality is this particular change that we're recommending probably doesn't have much chance of being forward. Not that, go ahead, Phil. Yes, sir.
I think we discussed this before and perhaps answered. But once we make a recommendation to the county council, and let's just say, hypothetically, they pick 8 or 9 items that they want on the ballot, is it possible that they can put all 8 questions on one ballot question, and the public votes them all in or all out?
I don't think that that's going to comply with state law. I think
I didn't
it has to
think so
be
either.
broken into separate subjects.
Because
I'd love to
obviously,
do, I agree.
obviously, the ballot, I mean, poor old Tony out there,
Sure, yeah.
and the public, how many people in the public, well, if there's 3 items,
Well,
well,
in
anyway, just
2016,
asking.
to your point, Phil, in 2016, I believe it was, there were 8 charter questions on the ballot, and that's part of why we're going to revisit is there's ballot fatigue, there's resource that shows that most of the things that appear on a ballot, people say yes to because they kind of don't pay attention. So I'm with you, Phil. I wish we could present all of this as one, take it or leave it. But unfortunately, that's the decision of an entire charter rewrite or kind of piecemeal, which is what we're doing.
I wonder if they'll ask us to prioritize.
We're going to
We're gonna
prioritize.
do it,
Yes, sir.
okay.
We sure are. I think that's something we're going to do. So we're back to the question, and Bob, I want to, you've raised this, and we're in the discussion part of accepting Section 601A, and Sonia, you've made some thoughts. Are you is there any?
If if Laura and Paul believe that this solves it, as written, then I'm satisfied. I thought that part of the problem and the reason that the change was made was because a prior county executive did not present requested changes, and the county council grew frustrated and therefore took it away.
Yes.
And I understand how it should work, and I understand what Mr. Wilbur's saying. I'm just not sure it mandates that the county executive has to do it.
Right. That this verbiage
That's
does
right.
that, is what
Right.
you're saying. Okay.
But I mean, it shouldn't have to mandate it.
No,
I
it
mean,
shouldn't. And when we move forward, if we move forward, we can again, remember, we write out a document to the county council on our thoughts, and we will certainly be expressing our thoughts that a lot of these things that we've had to decide had to do with if everybody would just sort of behave and interact and communicate, we wouldn't be having these issues. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to call for the motion. We've had discussion. I appreciate the discussion, good points. So all those in favor of the recommendation on the changes to 601A, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, so that carries unanimously. Thank you, everyone, and good discussion. Where I had us, back to now the agenda, we finished 601. We finished personnel provisions. I think we are done. We had pretty much concluded Section 609, Article 600, and I'm now ready to move into Section 701. Is everybody on board with that? Okay, so this has to do with, much of this is budgetary and fiscal. There was a question that the council, it was a long question, and I'm certainly not going to read it, but it basically has to do, does the charter allow for the county executive to make changes to the capital improvement program after it has been submitted to the county council, but before it is formally adopted by the council? Mr. Wilbur and I had some good discussion this afternoon. It's been our recollection that the capital improvement program, I'm getting a little off script here, I apologize, but I'm trying to address what the council has asked of us. The capital improvement plan, first and foremost, it's just that, right? It's a plan. We all know that. In the course of these last couple years, and most especially in this past year when there was obviously COVID and interruptions at the state budget level or questions, the county council and the county executive both, and Laura, I'll ask you to weigh in on whether my recollection is even close, they all kind of by consensus agreed to delay a little bit some of the dates, which is allowed and called for in Section 700, because the council was uncertain what the budget from the state of Maryland was going to do. Therefore, what good does it do us to look at a CIP? Let's delay until after the General Assembly session. Laura, that was free of acrimony, wasn't it, between the executive and the council by and large? There was agreement to sort of, postpone or punt a little bit down the road?
Yeah, we did agree. We actually extend the date by resolution, so there is a formal vote on that.
Yeah.
Now, there has been question as to whether or not the CIP is a plan, and it should remain a plan. But there's a provision in here, and Paul, you can help me out on this one because I don't remember what section it is in, that states that the first year of your capital improvement program is your capital budget. And that's the problem. Because when you have the first year of your plan document say one thing, and then when you get to your capital budget that's adopted in June, and you have that gap in between, you're talking about, I think it's January or February, and then June, a lot can happen, as Mike said, the numbers from the state may change. So the question is, should they be adopted simultaneously, or should the capital improvement program be truly a planned document, and you would expect changes to happen to your capital budget in June?
So in the definition, 702A is that what you're talking about? It says capital budget, blah, 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 during the first fiscal year included in the capital program? Is that what you meant, or no?
I think that is.
Is that it? Yeah. Yes. In the next succeeding 4 years, yes.
Tony, I know you had a thought, question.
When I was in the school system and when I served here, to me, the plan was really 1 year because it would float, priorities would change. And so the first year you were locked in. After that, changes, it was open season again. But you tried to stay with it, but things did change. So I don't know if that impacts in here at all.
Ironically, I had a meeting this week, unrelated, on a topic with the state, with the budget secretary, Brinkley, Dennis Brinkley. And he shared with the group that we were meeting with, and we were talking about money and asking for money for a project here within the community. And he talked about one of his priorities, and he's been on the job for a while. There are things in the capital budget that have been in the capital budget for seemingly 15 and 20 years. And one of the things that he talks about to his staff and to all those involved is, let's get this off the budget. Let's move it forward. So I think what happens here also happens at the state level. Laura and/or Paul and/or I'll look to our folks who have had legislative experience. I look at this as a plan. I don't know if we need to do a deep dive and change this and codify that year one of the plan is, it's pretty confusing as it is, but that's me as a layperson. Phil, anybody got any thoughts on this?
Well, I think Laura's referencing 704H. The portion of the cost of the capital program that must be paid for in the next fiscal year shall be the capital budget.
Where were you, Bob?
704H.
Page 37.
I think that's the section Laura was thinking about.
Shall be the capital budget.
It says the same thing in the definitions. So fine.
So I guess the question is there, and Laura, and again, we appreciate your expertise, and we've asked this question on numerous times, is there a problem that needs to be fixed? And I know you're giving an opinion, and I know who you work for, and Paul, I'll look to you also. Is there an egregious problem here that needs to be fixed?
On my end, the only thing that's come up is whether or not the county executive could amend it once it's submitted. And that doesn't seem to, the charter doesn't seem to answer that question.
Yeah, I think it should.
So we normally go through this section by section.
That's correct, yep.
Section 701, 702, 703, are we saying there are no changes that need to be discussed?
Thank you, Bob. Yes, and I apologize, I went off script. 701, 702, 703.
I mean, I guess the question is, does anybody have any
Yes.
changes they want in those sections?
Thank you very much,
Yeah,
Bob.
I'd like to raise a question in 702C, right at the end, where it talks about money and so on and so forth. The succeeding year's taxes, nor shall the term include the resurfacing of any roads. And I remember when I was in office, there were financial constraints nationally. And we always used state money. The state funded road upgrades and renovations. And Governor Schaefer had done it, Governor Ehrlich did it. They withheld state money on road work.
Roads.
And we got a little bit. As I remember, we got $400,000, and normally it was like 1.5 for $2 million. And $400,000 for road work in Wicomico County is a waste of time, frankly. So when I read that, I thought, good golly, they can't use, even if we had a really great year somehow, somewhere, that says you can't use, if I'm reading it right, you can't use county money to include the resurfacing of any road.
Where you said, I'm at a loss where you.
Yeah, he's at
sorry, Phil.
702C, Phil.
See, right at the end,
paragraph.
Phil, all the way down to
Second
the left, see
paragraph.
where it says? It says,
Oh, yeah.
nor shall the term including the resurfacing of any road. That, to me, if we, let's say the county was flush and had some money, to me, it says they can't use that money to pave county road. The state has always funded road money, at least when I was there, I guess it's still there. And Schaefer did it, and then Ehrlich did it, and I don't know, maybe O'Malley did it. It doesn't make any difference who they are. They held money back for the state to operate the state of Maryland. And they just looked at us and said, well, it is what it is. You'll get $400,000 instead of what you normally would get, which is $2 million, let's say. And when I read that, it says, to me, you can't use any county money to resurface any roads.
What would be Phil, what would be the thinking of that?
I think Paul wrote that, to tell you. I don't know. I mean,
Is that what it said?
Yeah,
I thought it said you can't use any capital
Yeah,
funds.
that's the way I would read it.
Right.
Just like that, that you could use, say, operating budget
yeah, but
money.
those are tight. An operating budget, you figure that down to the nickel, well, you try to.
Still, it's an estimate.
It's an
of
estimate.
spending.
All those are estimates. Even the capital budget's an estimate at best guess. You put in, you're going to renovate a school for $5 million. Well, you hope you're right, but it might be $5.2 million in the end. And to me, when it says that, and I don't want to belabor it, although I am, to me, it's kind of like, if it says it there, you can't do it. If it's not said there, then some council or executive down the road could say, well, you know what? We're being cut at the state level on road money this year, but we do have in our contingency some money we can use, because we got a real problem out on the west side in these 3 roads, and we better fix them or we're going to lose the base, and then we're really in trouble. So if I had my druthers, I wouldn't let that say that. But that's just me. Because it says it, therefore you got to live by it. I hope I'm not.
I mean, I don't know that I disagree with Mr. Sarbanes, but is the reason that's in there is because roads are not considered to be a capital
That's
project?
the way I take it.
And in order to
don't know.
address Mr. Sarbanes' comments, you'd have to basically say that roads can be considered a capital project?
Yeah.
Resurfacing would be a maintenance issue, not a,
Well,
Right.
Yeah.
Operating.
Yeah.
It's a different
I think you're
budget.
right. I think you've hit on it.
I mean, the question is whether a road or resurfacing a road can be considered a capital project.
Right.
And I assume that clause is in there just to make clear that under the charter,
It's not.
it's not.
Right.
So it's,
So is the thinking process that you should pay for your maintenance as you go along? You shouldn't put
Right.
it on the shoulders of the taxpayers, spread out over, unlike a mortgage, if you got to put a new roof on the house, put a new roof on the
Right.
house.
Said another way, if you're building with the West Side Collector Road, that's a capital improvement project.
Right. Yeah.
But if you're resurfacing Naylor Mill Road, it isn't. I think that's your point, Bob, and it's a good point.
West Side Collector was a new project, a new capital program,
Not to split-
resurfacing
Not to
Naylor
split
Mill.
hairs, but let's say that there was discussion that we were going to widen Naylor Mill Road from whatever. Is that now, is the widening part of that project
That
capital?
might be one of those fine points that
Yeah.
This says
come under
resurfacing a road,
resurfacing.
resurfacing
Yeah,
an
this does say-
existing road.
Yeah.
That's
And
not riding.
I might, I'm just offering, I hear you, I hear everybody. This is just 1 year. And so this doesn't, if the county is flush with cash, then this project, fixing a road, could be addressed next year. Right, this is just a 1-year thing. I don't look at this as I'm sorry, I'm probably not making much sense, but
To your point.
This is just one-
You might have a $10 million estimate of what the projects are going to be, and you only spend $9,500,000. This is talking about what you can do with that
This-
$500,000, and you can't resurface roads.
Correct.
It has to be spent on some capital improvement project that's already in your plan,
thank you.
I think.
Yes. So I hear you. Points have been made. I hope they've been somewhat answered.
I'm not going to pick up my glove and go home.
All right.
Go here to play.
Okay. Good conversation. Thank you. And your thoughts are noted, and let the people know that Tony Sarbanes still cares about resurfacing the county roads. I'm
30
I'm
years
just
from now,
teasing.
some councilman will say, why
So
is that in
let's-
there?
So we're okay with 702, 703, 704? Bob, is this,
They
yes,
had-
sir.
No, they had a note in, I mean, the note that you're talking about, I have, it says, the question is, they want to know, in section 704 about extending the date for the adoption of the capital improvement program. That's one of the questions that we were asked. I didn't understand why we were asked it, because I thought section 707 addressed it, but maybe it didn't.
So Laura, 707 talks about the authority to change dates. So what I was referencing earlier was they have extended the deadline to approve the capital improvement plan. And I think Bob is suggesting because they have the authority to do it right here in 707.
That's true, but we're having to do this every year. So it's almost like, why is the charter saying that it has to be adopted by, I don't know, what's that date? It's February or January, something like that, but then we always extend it to.
Always.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
the
a,
last few years we have, in a way.
say that again, please.
The last few years we have done.
Yes, we've extended it. And again, I ask, that has been done without acrimony. I'm not saying that makes it right, but this has not been a point of contention. It has been a gentleman and gentlewoman's agreement to extend the deadline of the CIP.
Yes.
So, I mean, is the real question whether or not the dates that are in section 704 should be advanced beyond February to make it March or April, or?
I think the question, should it really be to be adopted simultaneously with the budget?
The CIP and the budget should be adopted at the same time, would simply eliminate the need to bring in a CIP in February and adopt the budget in June. Just adopt them both in June.
Well, is there
No.
a challenge there that they get just so much on their plate that it's, I mean, I can't imagine that stuff has to be overwhelming, and to have it essentially all put together, is there, because the capital budget is a long-term, capital plan is a long-term, and so therefore you kind of address that while you deal with all the day-to-day stuff, and then you could say, okay, this is gonna be it, but couldn't they pass it and then later amend it?
Well, I'm sorry, they have a hearing on the capital improvement program.
Correct.
And you can do that, that's why they do it in February, in March, whatever it is. Those things are usually well-attended, and usually well-attended by school people, because that's their chance to get up and say what they have to say. And then, hopefully, the council,
During the budget session,
well, or they
Yeah,
can
yeah.
do it in the, yeah.
yeah.
So then they hear it,
Right.
and they might come back, and what they put out for that hearing, they might say, you know what? We missed a couple things, and we need to amend that. That gives them time to change it and then adopt it later, like, June, whatever it says. So that's why I think there's that gap in there. I think that's healthy to leave it there, frankly. Just my 2 cents worth. Could I throw out one other thing, Mike?
Of course, yes, sir.
You know, we got a thick document from the bond council, and Paul might understand it. It was way above my pay grade, but I think that's probably got to be looked at in this section. Am I right? Do you remember that thick thing we got from the
Yeah,
bond
I've
council?
got it right here, and a lot of it, the parts that I felt had the meat in it were where she talked about section 710 and 712.
Is that when it was? Okay.
Yeah, I think she may, mine's got separated around a little bit because I
Yeah.
shuffled it a little bit.
This is the Lindsay Rader stuff. Paul.
Lindsay Rader, yeah. She
Yeah.
does make reference at the very end of her document, should 704G be amended to specify at the end to clarify how far in advance of a public hearing on an amendment to the capital budget notice of such public should be given. So maybe we should look at that. Yeah, I waded through her stuff
Yeah.
and I,
Waited.
yeah, it was,
It's,
and like you, it's a,
it's,
Yeah, I went out and took
it's
a walk.
intense.
yeah.
You know, I'm of the, my brain's spinning, I think, like everybody else's is. Anybody who has been through a budget, it's every year from about April until about June, whether you're a member of a Fruitland Town Council or a Salisbury City Council or a Wicomico County Council or go on up to Annapolis, it's a dizzying time. And the budget is a dizzying and very fluid thing. I'm of the opinion, I don't know if it's an opinion, I guess my thought is, again, I'm not seeing that there are major problems that are out there, notwithstanding Ms. Rader's very extensive look. Paul, are there any major things, and I'm going to try to get back, we are, for the record, we are on 704. I'm not getting rid of all of 700. I'm of the inclination to leave things alone. That's where I sit. Sonia?
I just wanted to get clarification on something that you said, Laura, just in terms of, because we're also here to review and when things get updated, because we do this every 10 years. And understanding that it might not go to, get part of the resolution or go on, onto a ballot, but still our due diligence is to point out if something needs to be modified or not, as well. So I'm just trying to clarify that if the last 5, 6, 7 years, we've always had to change it, then it needs to be changed. Or we need to just say that it's something to look at or just to think about and it might not happen. I want to understand that. I know that you said that that we take the section, what is it, 707, where we can change the dates, and you've done that the last 4 or 5 years. So it's not a big deal, and it's not something that even, I'll say, needs to be voted on or whatever, that we need to take as a resolution, because it's not something that's kind of acrimonious like some of the other things that we have in here. But just from your opinion, what I heard is that, okay, we're at this is something where we always have, it's always an exception. And so again, coming from a world where I work on specifications, if you have an exception, you don't keep putting in specification exceptions, you change the spec. So I want to hear what your recommendation would be of the timing that would make sense for that, if you had one, or Paul, or whoever the right person is.
Well, my thoughts on that would be is how you view the capital improvement program. Because if you're looking at it as truly a planned document, then your capital budget is always going to be different than your capital improvement program. Your CIP process actually begins in October. As you mentioned, it's a long, drawn-out process. And it is time-consuming, and you are juggling other tasks at the same time. So it does make sense. I understand why it was put into the charter the way it's written, but the exception has been made for the last several years. So I really think it just depends on how you view the capital improvement program with the clause that says that first year has to be your capital budget, because that's not going to happen. It's a planned document.
Mm-hmm.
So to get rid of that first year, where's that, Laura, in here?
It's in the definition, as someone pointed out.
And it's in the section that,
Yeah.
uh-oh.
Section 8.
Yeah, which one?
Section H is 704.
704H.
Yeah, but I can see why, I can see why that first year of the capital program should be considered as part of the regular budget, only because that, in reality, that's what it's going to be. Or from planning
From
purpose.
planning, but because the state numbers change all the time, your circumstances are going to change. I mean, you're talking about several months in between. It's going to change.
What you're actually doing, it's not the plan. It's, yeah. I don't know how to solve it, I'm just saying. You can't keep putting specification exceptions in. So,
Yes, Julie, please.
You know, you talk about sausage being made.
Yes.
The capital improvement plan timeframe is when they're scratching and negotiating, and that's the beginning. I want this for my department. I want this for my department. I want this truck. Can I have your old truck? If I can't, there's a lot going on that's not seen in the upper levels. And I think that the timing is needed. And I think the finite or perceived finite time frame where they have to ask, they have to go to the public and admit that they couldn't get it done, they need a resolution to extend it each year, keeps it from ending up being a nightmare and being finally approved on June 30th or whatever. You know, I think there's a reason that the Supreme Court always runs out of time. It's because they're not allowed to have an extension. Well, I think that this gives us that little bit of leeway each time with the perception that there's a deadline that can be moved if we have to. And that way it doesn't keep moving out. So that's my 2 cents.
Good point.
And again, just looking at 707, that does give the authorization to change the dates. You know, I guess what a concern I might have as someone who pays attention and watches this is I don't want the extension of the capital improvement plan deadline to be weaponized, if you will, to be used as a political gotcha that you're not doing your job. The CIP needed to be done in February. Now here we are extending it again and asking for another extension. So kind of to Sonia's point, if we're going to have a date, then we have a date. And either 707 needs to change because no matter what we do, Sonia, just talking out loud here, if we were to move the date from February to, I don't know, April, I'm just making something up, 707 still exists and allows the authority to extend deadlines, is basically what it does. So I watch these extensions every year, and I must say that I sit there and, again, the budget process is confusing enough when you're in part of it. But as a layperson out there, it's like, oh, okay, they're extending the CIP deadline, and that's just what they're doing because they don't know what's going to happen in Annapolis. And I guess that's probably the consistent, right? Annapolis begins January, the second week in January, and ends the second week of May. And we have this arbitrary deadline for the CIP of February in the middle of a time when a lot of our funds, we simply don't know what they're going to be. So now that I'm talking out loud here, it does seem a little odd that we have a CIP date that is right in the middle of the General Assembly session time where the state budget is set. If we were, again, bear with me, just talking out loud, and this is no fun. But if we were to extend the date, I forget who said it earlier, does that then condense, and I'll look to Phil and Tony, and that ability to have a CIP discussion and hearing in the public, maybe in March or April, and now we've got the CIP and the budget all due really, you can't start work on any of it until after that second week in May when you know what the General Assembly has done. Laura, does that create a problem, do you think? Or Paul, Phil, anybody?
Personally, I think the public hearing closer to the budget is better, because when you have the public hearing in February, by the time you get to June, when you adopt it,
Right.
you forget.
And the only time in recent memory, and my memory is just one person's, the CIP became problematic. I remember Mr. Culver pulled the funding for the Mardella renovation at the Mardella High School out of the CIP, which created a firestorm, and the public absolutely responded to that. And I believe Mr. Culver responded in kind and returned the CIP funding for Mardella High School. All of that firestorm occurred between February, the hearing, and the adoption of the CIP. So the public did react appropriately when, wow, hey, it worked. Thank you, Phil. That's what I'm attempting to say here, is that while this does not fit the process and Sonia, again, this is what she does for a living every day. When things go askew, the public has responded appropriately when a major shift has occurred in the CIP prior to the adoption in the budget.
And they had the time to do it.
The time to do it.
Yeah, so in this particular case, leaving it as it is, you have the time to respond, because there's difference, I mean, I'm talking about pieces of paper and not like
Absolutely.
So I go through this all the time with United Way. So it makes sense to have the time, the chance to respond. I'm just saying, well, you heard what I said.
Of course.
So it's fine. I appreciate the explanation. Thank you.
Where are we on section 704G or H relative to the first year of the capital program is in fact the first year of the budget, right? Do we want to, Bob, any thoughts? I'm not, look, I guess I will say this out loud. If this is confusing to us, imagine it being and appearing on a ballot in whatever our next ballot date is. I'm sorry, brain's still a little foggy. It would be even hard for us to explain why we're doing it. And so the defense of why is this item on the ballot, I'm not even sure we can defend it. I'm just talking out loud myself here. Thoughts?
I personally, after having all of this and listening to it,
Yeah.
I'm inclined just to leave it alone. There is the flexibility if it's needed. And to my way of thinking, when you're looking at a capital budget for 5 years, you're going to make certain assumptions as you put the puzzle together. When the legislature sine die, they're done, and you now know what's going to happen. Well, you may not know even then because government has to sign it or not sign it. But be that as it may, at that point you go, whoops, we thought we were going to get 500,000. We're only going to get 250. Well, we got to go back and redo it. But maybe 80% of it's already been done and addressed and taken care of. Now we got this one, we got to fix it. Now you may pull some other items, but the bottom line is it's not like you wait until March or April to start putting this thing together, and then it.
It's more like balancing a budget versus creating a budget.
Yeah.
Could I
Look
if you look at section G a minute?
Which one, I'm sorry?
G,
G, yes?
yeah, well, you see in that, and it might be fine, but if you start reading through that, not the first sentence, the second sentence says, "The county council shall have no power to change the form of the program as submitted by the county executive or to add any project or to increase any project recommended by the county executive for capital purposes." You got to remember, there's an operating budget and a capital budget. So the exec submits his capital budget, and it is what it is. That's, to me, it says they can't change it.
They can cut it.
They can cut it.
But they
Well,
can't.
I don't know. Does it say they can cut? It says they
There was a
have
place
no
there.
change, says they can't change it.
The operating budget they can cut, but they, I don't know.
Yeah.
They can't do a capital, though.
Yeah, the operating budget they can cut. But this, I mean, it says the county council shall have no power to change the form of the program, but change, submitted.
But what does the first sentence say? It says the county council shall approve, decrease, or delete any items in the capital program as submitted on or before the third Tuesday in February of each year. They'll have, okay, then the county council shall have no power to change the form of the
It's so
program.
confusing, too much. I looked it up before, I was like, oh my.
Well, it says one thing one place, another thing another.
What do they mean?
We'll ask the attorney to
Correct,
give
they
us
can
this.
cut it.
Huh?
They can cut it, but they can't add to it.
Well, wait a minute, what is, are you looking at G, Bill?
Excuse me?
Yeah, the first sentence, shall approve, decrease, or delete any items, as Bob pointed out, as submitted or amended on, before the third Tuesday of February.
All
And the
right.
council then shall have no power to change the form of the program or add any project or increase any project recommended by the executive. So they can decrease it if they by majority vote.
Delete.
Wait a minute, let me-
Take
They
away.
could do it away with it altogether if they want.
Could. Yeah.
all right, well, wait a minute.
So,
It's not, but that was my interpretation, then I got confused.
Now, see, well, okay, yeah, in the first part, but then after it says they can approve, decrease, or delete. Okay, I have to do it by the third Tuesday in February. Then it says, that next part,
so,
They can't add or increase.
can't add or increase.
But what is the last, but look at the last sentence.
Well, maybe that shouldn't be in there.
It says it doesn't say add or increase, but that last sentence makes it sound like.
I don't know. I don't want to dwell on it,
I
but
think it works.
Yeah, I personally think it's genius. I personally think it's genius.
Why?
The executive is gonna lay out what he thinks is his
yeah,
best-case scenario, so that they can't raise it. Their only power is to not go along with it. So, in
to
the.
say
ebb-
no to
Right,
this
no,
new
or cut
project. Right, okay.
Right, so it kind of, to me, I think it works really well.
So what does that last sentence mean in G? County council may, upon the recommendation after public hearing, doesn't that mean that they can't, what does that last sentence mean?
And the adopted capital budget.
Well, that's in case let's say it's a school, which that's 90% of the funding anyway in capital improvement. Let's say a school and the interagency council of the state comes in and says, well, here's the revised figure on what we'll pay, and it's a little bit different. Well, that gives them the right to change it.
Change it, so we, to take in account those other funds. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Sonia. To the group, are we okay moving past section 704? All right. Yes, Laura? It's okay, we're not going to bite your head off, we promise.
Does the county executive have the authority to amend the budget after it's submitted? Because that question I don't think was answered.
Council on the recommendation of the county executive, right?
Okay, so he submits it, council's extended the date till June, and in between that time period, can the county executive take it back and make amendments to it after it's already been submitted to council?
No, the county council may, upon recommendation of the county executive. The county executive comes back and said, hey, the figures have changed. County council, can you have a public hearing and approve the change in the capital improvement budget? Isn't that what it says?
See, I read that
This line
as,
says.
once the program is adopted, then it's amended by public hearing. But if council hasn't adopted it, they've just extended that date, can the county executive then take it back, make changes to it, and bring it back to council?
After a public hearing?
But it said, yeah, because it says the county council may, upon the recommendation of the county executive, so they can't do it on their own. Okay, after the public hearing and the affirmative vote of the majority of members of the council, comma, then they amend the adopted capital budget. So the county exec can come in and say, we had the hearing 3 weeks ago, and you all voted yes, but I just got new information that the state has cut it or added to it, so would like to amend it. Would you approve that?
And that's how I interpret that.
Oh,
But the question is, if council hasn't voted on it yet, we've extended it to June,
Voted on what,
the CIP, the capital improvement program.
right?
Okay,
What was
so,
proposed be amended?
great.
I think wouldn't it depend on whether or not, it seems to me, if I understand this correctly, right now, it's supposed to be done by the third Tuesday in February. What you're saying is that in certain instances, the county council extends that date
Yes.
till
June.
June. So the question that I have for you is, when they extend that date, do they also extend the date as to when they're gonna have the public hearing?
Yeah, we still have the public hearing in accordance with the
February.
charter.
Well, I mean, it seems to me, once you have the public hearing, you can't make an amendment to it if you don't vote until June, you're stuck with it. Or you gotta have a new public hearing.
It doesn't say
Right.
it here,
And that's
because
what
that's
it
the
said.
question that the council asked.
I mean, that may be, but it seems to me, with all due respect, Mr. Wilbur needs to stand up at that point and say, you can't do that unless you have a new public hearing.
Can we make that motion and Mr. Wilbur has to stand up
His hands violent.
and say, hey,
Stop.
I don't know if Paul agrees with that or not, but.
No, I think if it's had a public hearing and they want to change it, they can change it, but then I think it's another public hearing. Yeah.
If there's not been a public hearing, the executive can come back and he can put something different in it up until the point there's a public hearing.
that's what yours.
That's what I'm asking. The charter does not say that.
Right, exactly. And that's what the council, that is clearly the question that they asked. For clarification.
Has it happened
Yes.
that
That would be why they
the
asked.
CIP was adjusted and extended, and after that time and before being formally adopted, the county executive has made changes to the CIP?
Post-public hearing.
Yes, because we have the public hearing as soon as we receive it, because that's what the charter says to do.
Well, you could extend that too.
But it doesn't say that.
Well, I mean, it says you can extend dates.
I think you can extend any.
I just thought that if you extended the date for approval, you would automatically also extend the date for when you have the public hearing. So you're having it relatively
Yeah,
close.
707 says you can move the dates.
Anything in sections 704 or 705.
any of the dates,
So
made
maybe
by
that's what we
resolution.
need to do then in the resolution.
To push it
vote.
down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it seems to me the intent is that there's supposed to be a public hearing based on the presentation to the county council. And once you have the public hearing, the county executive cannot make a change without going through another public hearing.
That would be the common sense thing to do.
If we need to change the charter to say that, fine, but that's the way I read it is supposed to happen anyway.
Again, we can't change the charter to make the county executive abide by the charter. You know, I mean,
But at that point, at that point, the county council can look at it and go, we're just going to delete it. You didn't comply with the charter, we're just going to delete it. I mean, they can enforce that simply enough, they just delete that whole, whatever change you made.
They sure could, because it right was 704G, says they can approve, decrease, or delete. So that would hold true throughout the process. And if the county executive, whomever he or she is, were to make a significant change to the CIP after the public hearing, a member of the county council who knows the charter well could speak up and try to persuade 3 other members of the county council that this isn't the right way this has to happen.
I mean, the other alternative is we can add a sentence that says essentially what you're saying, Laura, and that is that once the public hearing is, once there is a public hearing, the county executive may not amend the program.
Or if he does amend it, must have another public
We can
hearing.
add a sentence that says that, but
Where would, if we entertain that sentence, where might that sentence go?
I guess in section G.
In G?
But is a possible, we want to clarify, but don't want to complicate, right? So if Laura was just stating that, you know, when you talked about section 707, that instead of just moving one date, that you move also the other date, does that solve what we're discussing? Like if we move, I think that you were talking about moving the
Yeah.
hearing a little bit as well, not keeping that just in February and moving that to June?
Yeah, I think that does resolve it, but if I'm not here, if Paul's not here, in the future, who's going to know that?
Right.
Yeah.
We need operating guidelines. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm sure everybody will read this conversation.
Oh, exactly. God bless them if they do, if they read this conversation. You're correct. I'm going to go back to, if this is dizzying for us, how can we, in good faith, offer a change to first the county council and then to the public? I just asked that question.
Has this happened more than once? I mean, is it a frequent problem?
Yeah, I mean, at least the last 2 to 3 years, because the state numbers have changed. I mean, we've always have held the public hearing per the charter right after it's submitted. And then the county executive will then do what he needs to do to adjust the numbers and the capital budget, CIP, and then we adopt it at the same time.
I'm not sure this is the answer you want, but I would suggest if you think it's a significant problem, that you and Mr. Wilbur draft a sentence or two that you would like to have added to section 704G for us to consider. So it might simplify the issues for us, so we better understand it.
Sure.
I'm okay with that. Sonia?
Is it 704G only? Is it anything that needs to be, or is it anything in 707 that says that they need to be moved as a pair? Like, just move one.
Sonia, think that it's both. I think that's a great point. Laura, to add to what Bob just said, if as you're wordsmithing 704G, if an accompanying wordsmith to 707, right, with changing dates, Sonia, also has to do with if dates are changed and public hearings also, right?
Yeah, I was just saying
Sort
as
of
a
what we're
pair,
trying to-
just got to look at the whole piece.
Yeah, I think that's an appropriate thing to do.
The other point, I would hope that maybe we have Mr. Strasburg and Mr. Baker here, because they might be able to present a perspective from the executive's point of view as to
Sure.
why the change either should be made or not be made.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones who deal with it.
So my note to myself that I'm going to run past the group after this dizzying bit, Laura and Paul are going to try to wordsmith, but we will, as a group, reconvene with, again, with Wayne and Dallas here, who have that expertise from the Office of CE. We will start our next meeting, no matter where we end tonight. We'll revisit 704 and get some thoughts from some of our missing members. Does that seem reasonable to everyone? Okay. Thank you. Thank you for those suggestions.
Do we want to take a break or not?
Sure, let's take that was dizzying. Let's take a 5-minute break. Thank you. Okay, let us reconvene.
Can I just say one thing?
You may, of course.
I want to apologize to Mr. Dunn, because Mr. Dunn called me tonight before this meeting, and I told Mike that this was going to be a really quick meeting because there was nothing controversial on the agenda, and we were going to fly right through this. So it just shows you how smart I am.
Well, and to echo that, I agreed with him. So it shows how we've got some significant brain power leading this
But
committee.
you, look at the agenda, I think that we're gonna.
No, I know, and you make a great point.
Just
but
go with that.
we thought that we would be moving a little quicker, but we aren't. So I think we
You
are.
know, this is also,
This is-
for most of us, this is a serious education process. I mean, there are a couple
Absolutely.
of you, several in the room who have had some experience with it, but you know, it's, you know, the devil's in the details.
Devil is in the details.
I don't mean it in any way as a criticism. I mean, it just shows you that we didn't understand
Correct.
some of the details ourselves.
That's right.
And as it starts getting discussed, it becomes clear that what the issues might be.
Right.
So I think we are on section 705 at this point. I'll look to the group as usual. Any thoughts? Okay, we will turn to, we're skipping by agreement, section 706. We will come back to that at our next meeting. 707, obviously we're going to be talking about that, the change dates. 708, okay, I'm just looking. 709. 710.
I hate to even do this,
you're
but,
good.
I mean, as Mr. Tillman pointed out earlier, or somebody did, that's one of the sections 710 and 712 are sections that
Lindsay,
bond counsel suggested
Okay.
might need changes.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm smart enough to understand.
If you
what
understand what you
suggesting, but,
Paul, are you smart enough to,
What a question.
notice I left it
You know he's gonna
open-ended.
say-
Yeah,
Phil.
right. Well, you know, bond counsel, they speak in a
Listen,
special language.
When I was on the city council in Salisbury, Lindsay Rader, who wrote this and what we're about to do, and there were times when she was in front of us and, you know, you sort of, you're somewhere between nodding and dizzied. She's brilliant, and her area of expertise is in an area that most of us don't have much expertise. So if she's made some thoughts, if anybody can interpret what her recommendations are in 7, 10, or 12,
I think-
we'll certainly entertain them.
I think I would like to talk with her,
All
which I
right.
have not done.
Okay? And you and I have had that conversation, so let's put you and Lindsay on the clock
The only thing is, I'm going to be.
You're on vacation.
I'm on vacation.
the next time.
meeting,
So with the group's approval, we're going to skip 7, 10, 11, and 12, awaiting Mr. Wilbur's conversation with Lindsay Rader, who wrote the recommendations. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. I'll make a note of that. We are now then
See?
off agenda, and now again, this is where the group, we approved an agenda tonight that ended with a review of Charter Section 712, which we just agreed to pass on. I guess I might need some parliamentary interpretation. Are we allowed to move forward, or are we required to stop based on the agenda that we presented?
I would say if the group wants to move forward, if you do,
Understood?
then as a group, vote to move forward, continue on.
And I would need a motion to do that, to extend beyond our approved agenda.
Sure.
Thank you, Phil. Is there a second?
I haven't read that part.
Second.
Thank you. So all we're doing, thank you, Sonia, second. We are simply voting to extend beyond what our approved agenda was, and our approved agenda ended at section 712. The motion on the floor is to continue beyond section 712. Matt?
To be honest, I haven't read it.
You haven't read section 8 and beyond.
I have not
Okay.
read through 7.
Okay, that's fair. And again, I accept responsibility there that we set out an agenda that said section 700. Tony, did you have a comment?
Well, the same as Matt.
Okay,
I've
so
read it way back, but
Phil, yes, sir.
not a second time.
Mr. Chairman, I move we adjourn.
Yeah.
Okay, before we do that, thank you. Well, there's nobody in the
public.
public. There are no public comments. So you withdraw your motion to extend? We had a second. You had a motion to move forward and a
The
second.
motion to adjourn would supersede that.
Yes?
Yeah, sure.
Then let's do the motion to adjourn. All those in favor? Second? All those in favor? Aye. Thank you all very much.